Hi friends, welcome back to another video. In this video, I want to share with you guys how you can have a healthy attitude towards anger. You're allowed to feel the anger in your life and learn how to process anger in a healthy way so that you understand it, so that you can move through your life more freely. I think we have specific attitudes about anger that is very not helpful when we experience it. And, we see a lot of angry people out there in the world, and you just wonder, like, what is wrong with this person? I used to struggle with anger because I felt like I couldn't be angry and I shouldn't be angry. It was really hard to deal with the anger because I felt like I shamed myself a lot after getting angry. I couldn't stop myself from getting triggered, and I would try, I honestly would try, but I didn't really know how to process anger in a healthy way, which is why I would just get angry over and over again and then shame myself for getting angry. I was taught to suppress my anger. The people who triggered me the most and made me the most angry were my family. My friends never passed my boundaries, so I would rarely get mad at them. And so when I used to get angry in my house, my parents would just be they would get upset at me. And this is where my guilt comes from, because I was not allowed to be angry. So they would say things like, oh, there you go, you're getting angry again. You're such an angry person, as if that was my entire being and that's who I am. And they would say things like, oh, that's not very ladylike of you to get angry. I would explode every once in a while, which probably happens every other day because I was such an angry person. And I just felt like I was the worst person in the world. I usually say stuff that's extremely rude. Thinking back to it, I don't think that I was wrong to be angry because I was standing up for myself, but it was the way that I handled the situation that wasn't healthy and wasn't productive. As a product of how I was raised and just the image of anger that I had in my head, I became an extremely passive person. I still think I am a pretty passive person, but I do think that I stand up for myself now, so then I feel it's okay to be passive sometimes. I don't like being confrontational. It feels really uncomfortable for me. But as a result of all of that, I honestly used to feel when I got angry, I would become less of a woman, or less of a girl, or less of a female, because I was taught that being angry makes you less of a woman. And so I was oh my gosh, I'm not a girl at all. Which is kind of crazy because it's that's not how it works, but it's just how it is. So now when I get angry, I do not try to convince myself to not be angry, because that's not productive, especially in the first stage of when you are feeling the initial anger. I do feel I used to try to convince myself don't be angry right away, which is not very productive. And no longer tell myself oh, okay, you shouldn't be angry because of blah blah blah, because that doesn't help. It's not very useful. So I let myself be angry. I don't throw things around anymore. I think because I'm not as angry as I used to be. A major game changer for me in terms of my attitude towards anger is understanding that anger is a way of letting me know that my boundary has been crossed. Another thing that helps with attitude towards anger is understanding that it's a built-in mechanism for your body. It's literally a signal that can go off without your logical brain processing the fact that someone has crossed your boundaries. If you react or get angry before you even understand it, that's totally normal, because your body is kind of doing the work for you. It's kind of crazy that I used to think something that was used to keep me safe and is built for me, to advocate for me, was something that I was ashamed and felt guilty of. I was ashamed of my anger. I felt guilt towards my anger, when all I was trying to do when I was angry was protect myself. But trust me, I don't think that anger ever goes away. If people continuously hurt you despite the fact that you don't stand up for yourself and you don't get angry back, it's still there. You gotta acknowledge it one way or another, and it comes out in strange ways. That's why Beef exists, because that whole show is about anger. So I actually didn't understand Beef in a way, because I was whoa, how angry, how much anger do you have to reach that point where you're going back and forth and doing all those things? And to a certain level, I do understand it, but to another level where I'm like, now who I am, I'm like, that's crazy to me. Like, it's insane. And I hope that never happens to me. But anyways, I just went on like a tangent. Also know that it is a huge blessing when you first start working on your anger and building a better relationship with yourself, because I started understanding like what types of relationships were not benefiting me in my life. I started setting more boundaries, saying no to people, because I didn't want to anger myself. I didn't want to be that person to disrespect my own boundary. My cat is in the room, my kitten. So if you hear her purring or meowing, that's her. I have 2 cats. One of them is older, so she's the kitten. Anyways, back to the video. After you've kind of reframed how you see anger, learn what helps you dissipate your anger. Learning to redirect your anger and help it dissipate is the most healthy way to process it. For me, I like to go to the gym. Playing volleyball also helps. Anything physical honestly helps with anger. Doing yoga is another example. Even going for a walk, like although it is slow paced and not extremely intense, being able to move your body is extremely helpful. Like just the action of like moving your body or dancing, whatever it might be. If you play a sport or have like some way of exercising, I'm guessing that is probably the best way for you to help deal with the anger, cope with it. Most of the time it is physical. It's going to be a physical activity. I'm not saying it 100% is, because like someone who paints might express their anger through that way, but personally I'm more of like a move around type of person. But when you feel anger, it is like a physical reaction to things. I feel like when I feel angry, it's like a huge sudden surge of energy. This is one time where I was like so tired, and then I started therapy or whatever, and I started like complaining about something. I don't think you should like complain about stuff in therapy, but I was just telling my therapist about something. And then I was literally like so angry that I woke up, because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. Like I got like 4 hours of sleep prior, but I was literally just so angry after my therapy session, like in a good way though, because I was like feeling the anger and stuff, that I just like could not go back to sleep. So I got up instead and like went to eat or whatever. But I just thought it was so funny. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm so mad. I can't even nap. And like, I love napping. Oh, another thing that I do is I like to journal if physical activity doesn't help. But I feel like journaling kind of goes into the next step of how you can process your anger. Okay, hopefully by now you've kind of changed your attitude and you no longer like shame yourself for the anger. This is a very ideal situation, right? And you also figure out what way works for you to get rid of your anger. And so like third step is now using your logical brain to kind of process the anger, understand it, understand why you were angry, what you need to do about it, etc., etc. The main question that I ask myself is, what boundary for you has been crossed, or what boundary has been crossed? I feel like what I used to ask myself after getting angry is, why do I get so mad at small things? It always feels like it's like a small situation, but in reality, it's actually something that's really important. So you might feel like it's a really small situation and you're angry at that situation, but I actually encourage you to dig deeper and don't prevent yourself from asking yourself like, what boundary has been crossed? Because just because it's a small situation doesn't mean it's not going to come back, and it doesn't mean that your boundary hasn't been crossed. So some part of you probably feels like you've been taken advantage of, or someone has done something wrong to you. I think I get the most angry when I feel like someone is disrespecting my time. Like that's something that's really specific. I used to get angry when people made requests towards me, like when people would make requests and ask me to help them out. And my love language is acts of service, so it's not abnormal for me to want to help people out. But I think I feel the most anger when I feel like someone doesn't care about my time, or they're not grateful for my help. And I felt that the most towards my parents, because they were always asking me to do things, and I felt like my time was no longer mine. So when I was angry, it was a red flag for me to be like, hey, you don't have enough time to be spending to like do all these things for the house when you can barely take care of yourself. That was like a boundary that was being crossed. And then I realized like, oh, I only have a certain amount of time to allocate towards helping the family. Not that I'm being selfish, but it's just how it is. Anger taught me that my time was extremely important and I shouldn't just give it away, even if I felt like, yes, I do want to help out. Like, yes, obviously I want to help everyone in this world, but I don't have all the time in the world. Whenever I feel that type of anger, I understand like exactly what is going on now. Being able to understand that about myself was really helpful because I was like, okay, this is something I need to change about my life. And it kind of bleeds into the next step. Now that I understood that, like I understood what boundary was being crossed, I can then find a resolution for that. So hopefully I don't feel the same type of anger over and over again. And my resolution for that was actually boundaries I had to set with myself, things I had to tell myself to say like, okay, next time we're not going to say yes to these things because you don't have the time. And it's to protect yourself, and also in a good way though, like, you know, because you don't want to just let people step all over you. I think a lot of people's way of resolving something is, specifically anger, is to express it to the other person. I'm not against this, but there are a lot of people in this world that don't care about the fact that you're angry and don't care about the fact that your feelings have been hurt. I want you guys to keep that in mind. I am not against expressing your anger to people who care about you. 100%, I'm not against that. But just keep in mind, like, if you do put yourself out there and say like, hey, I've been angry, they ignore you or they do the same action again, then it's your job to set the boundary. And it's not fair, but that's how I live my life, because then, you know, it's like, okay, well, if you don't respect the fact that I was angry and you're not going to change your actions, then maybe you shouldn't be in my life. But I do think that people should be very careful about expressing their anger to certain people, especially people who, you know, like, will turn it around and make you feel guilty about it. Everyone knows those kind of people, and it's actually more draining to express your anger. So just be very mindful about that. And then if you do express your anger to someone, you know, you're willing to give them a chance. I don't think that's a bad thing either. Go into it with something like a line that you're okay with, or go into it with like, okay, like if they don't respond to my anger well, or if they don't respond to me expressing my feelings well, what would I like to do instead? Or like, what would I be okay with? That's kind of what I asked myself. Like, this step is extremely important because that's when you start realizing how other people react to your boundaries. Especially if you're someone who never really set boundaries, people are gonna think it's like the strangest thing ever. They're gonna be like, you're kind of mean now, or whatever. I don't know. I used to just ignore those because it's like, I'm not being mean. I'm really just setting boundaries now because I didn't know how to before. Don't let other people step all over you. Use your anger as a way of understanding yourself. You might be surprised by who does take your anger well and who will apologize and like take those steps to make sure that you don't feel that type of anger again. In a way, it deepened my relationships too, because now, you know, I feel more comfortable expressing my anger with certain people because I know like it's gonna be okay. Like when I do, now, I was kind of shocked by certain people where I have like expressed my anger towards and they didn't take it very well. Be mindful of that. There are certain people that aren't going to take it very well and you're not going to expect it. There's going to be people that you do expect to not take it well, and you know, you have to be okay with that because you can't change how they feel towards you. But there are boundaries that you will need to set, and then you're going to have like deeper relationships with other people because they're going to take your anger well and they're going to say that that's okay, like that you felt that way, and apologize for it and do something about it. And that's like the ideal situation. So that's my little spiel on anger. Please leave a comment below on what you struggle with the most when it comes to anger, whether it be your attitude or like finding a way to help dissipate your anger and dealing with it, or could be like understanding your own boundaries, or just, you know, resolving it, and also understanding like what you need after you find out what type of boundary has been crossed. Like always, please leave a like and subscribe if you're learning something out of this content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.